can begin. I'm on location. So should we begin? I think Sebastian is with us, so Sebastian will ensure that the recording is
Whenever
doing.
sir.
Yes. All right. Good afternoon to everyone, and welcome to the eighth session in health economics. Uh, the presentation, of course, was shared with you, so that should be in your hands or in front of your eyes. Um, and there's some things in the presentation which require your responses. So we'll take a look at those during the course of the session. Just a brief rundown on the mini research topics. I've only heard from three groups. Two of them have received some resource material they can begin to work with. And one group, I'm going to send them something which I have at the end of the session. But the other persons, I think, it'd be good to get an early start. So reach out, contact, and then we'll see what other help we can provide from my end over here. Good. So we're going to be looking at pharmaceuticals today. So let me share my presentation. Right, pharmaceuticals marketplace. There's a little bit of a switch from what we were looking at over the last three sessions when we were speaking primarily about financing matters, the source of money, the management of money, and how you spend it, how you pay the providers. We're going to make a little shift and look at the whole matter of the pharmaceuticals marketplace. And some things which has come across into the awareness of the public. And some people, of course, like to blame big pharma, pharmaceuticals, for a whole lot of problems which have come up, not just in health, but in social welfare, in financial matters, in national security matters, in diplomatic matters, and relations among countries around the world in order to source pharmaceuticals. And by pharmaceuticals, it's not just related to medication, but also the whole range of biologicals, vaccines, which come in, tablets, capsules, patch, liquid, gel, inhalers, and all of these things would be considered as pharmaceuticals. And sometimes the holistic practitioners like to tell you that big pharma are the ones who pay doctors to prescribe their product, the researchers to prove it, the politicians to promote it, they add regulators to prove it, the schools to teach it, the lawyers to defend it, the lobbyists to push for their product, the media to advertise, the celebrities to endorse, and the big tech to sponsor their products. So you can see where you fit into all of this. And where do the health professionals fit into all of this? A couple of other teasers, which I thought, will be good to grab your attention, give you an idea of the other view, the other side of pharmaceuticals and medication. And how does the public react to medication? Do we always assume that the public is very knowledgeable Sometimes a little knowledge could be a dangerous thing, but you still have persons who need quite a bit of help, consulting, advice, counsel in terms of medication, because sometimes persons go online to see something and they say, well, that's the one I want. And is that the right way to approach medication from the professional point of view, from the consumer point of view? So really what I want to do in the session then is to consider some of the main business, the economic aspects of pharmaceuticals beyond what you know, what you specialize in terms of their therapeutic value, and explore some of the tools of economics relating to cost outcome analysis, product cycle, procurement, value for money, integrated management, and these kinds of areas. Right. Remember this one? Remember this one, which I ran with you when we started the classes? And this takes you directly into what we're getting into. How do you evaluate pharmaceuticals from your point of view? But I wanted you to turn around and look at it from the point of view of the manufacturer. If you do your analysis, you do your market research, and you find this out about your medication and your competitors in the marketplace, which one of these products do you think you'll be most comfortable producing to get the biggest market share in a country? If you are M, you have this level of efficacy, and that's your average price, and people need 2 doses. So you need $66 to get 95% efficacy. If you're producing P, then you have 95% efficacy, but your price now is $40, 2 doses, to get 95% efficacy. So in the first case, if you do a simple average, then $66 to get 95% efficacy works out to maybe about 70 cents to get 1% efficacy. In the second case, where you have $40 to get 95% efficacy, a simple average, that's probably maybe around 35 or 40%, 40 cents to get 1% efficacy. Now, with the third medication, you're getting 75% efficacy, but it only costs $8. So, $8, 75, that's what 12 to, no, not 112, 80, 110. That's about 10 cents to get 1% efficacy. And the last one is only 1 dose, and that costs, probably about 7 cents to get 1% efficacy. If you want to capture the market, get the biggest share, quite apart from what the government would want to do, quite apart from what the health practitioners would want to do, just looking at it from your position, because it has implications for your marketing strategies. It has implications for your outreach. It has implications for where you want to launch your product, which countries you want to target. Where do you think you would want to be if you want to capture the market? That's the other side of the table. Anybody?
Doc, we couldn't hear the question clearly. Could you repeat, please?
Well, if you are the manufacturer, and when you do your market research and intelligence, this is where you find your product is in relation to your competitors. All right? So you're trying to determine, well, which one should I produce if I want to capture the market? If I go with J, if I go with A, or P, or M, which one do you think of these 4 products is going to allow you, the manufacturer, to get the best market share?
So I think it depends on the market that you're going after.
Uh-huh.
If the intention is to serve, say, developing countries where you're going to have mass in terms of the numbers, but
Yeah,
the economies are struggling and so on, then I would
yeah,
probably go for the AO.
yeah,
If I'm going to go, North America, Europe, then maybe I could try to go after a higher cost vaccine with a higher level of average efficacy. So I
yeah,
think it depends on the market that you're going after.
yeah, yeah. All right,
I agree with Williams Rayner. I
yeah,
just want to say that for some pharmaceutical companies, how they look at it is they're just going to go for the market that can afford the higher cost product, regardless of the cost to manufacture it, because in their minds they can always recoup the cost, especially in countries that have a lot of health insurance.
okay, okay, okay. But you see the position that the manufacturers are faced with, all right? Or they because sometimes we only look at it from the health professional end or from the patient end or from the government end, but start from the other end. And that's what I want to introduce you to. I mean, the global marketplace of pharmaceuticals extend way beyond the country. So you have to consider what makes, I mean, how do they make their decisions as to what to produce, where to launch it, what's the going price, what kind of terms and conditions we are going to offer? Because there are a lot of issues which go behind all of that before you can get your share in the marketplace. And just to be sure about this significance, which is what we're going to look at, of pharmaceuticals, why they play such a big role in the health system is not just for personal health, remember, for all of the community health matters, public health, vaccines and immunization and whatever, so that you have all the benefits to the community as against just one individual. That plays a big role. So pharmaceuticals play a very crucial role, but somebody has to produce them. And somebody's not going to produce them if they're not going to make money from it. So don't automatically assume that because this is good, they will do it out of the goodness of their heart. That's why my second slide. Turing Pharmaceuticals bought the rights for the 62-year-old product called Daraprim and raised the price. They raised the price from $1,350 to $750 per pill. Increased drew protests in the medical community, and many will no longer be able to afford the drug. Just in case you're considering in Jamaica dollars, if I just round it off to 160, then 1,350 was about 2,000 Jamaican dollars. When it shifted to $750 for a pill, that's 120,000 Jamaica dollars. Would you spend that for one pill? According to Turin, this is the business side of the whole thing. It's a good business decision. Good business decision. We have the monopoly, and you need the product, so we're going to sell it. And it's for a condition which is not very, very common. So it's not like I have a lot of competition in the marketplace for my product. So that's a good thing. I can control the market. I can sell it for whatever. When Turing Pharmaceuticals did that, the average cost of treatment for a patient rose from about $1,130 to $63,000. In Jamaica terms, that would have been like about $180,000 to $10.1 million for treatment for one person. For some patients who really need the product because of the severity of the condition, that's $634 million, which of course in Jamaica terms is going to be about 101.4 million Jamaica dollars for one patient, right? Good business decision or not?
Certainly for profits and if they have shareholders.
Yep, and the shareholders will be very happy. Shareholders will be very happy. Well, the good thing about it is that they've told the Protestants, so the federal authorities got into the mix, and federal authorities told them, no, you cannot do that. And therefore they managed to scale down. In fact, I think the CEO, Martin Shkreli, had a jail term or big fine on whatever he had to pay. What about this one? Pharmaceutical companies also have to consider not just what is the state of market, but what about liability in case of lawsuits? For drug companies, $26 billion to resolve opioid lawsuits. And I don't need to tell you what opioids have been doing in terms of the population in the European countries, in the US, etc. With overdose and abuse and the number of persons who die and all of these things. So 3 major drug distributors and pharmaceutical giants, including J&J, agreed to do that because of the thousands of lawsuits over the opioid crisis. And these are the 4 companies which were accused by states, cities, counties of funneling a flood of opioid painkillers to the community, which led to overdose deaths of more than that, 500,000 people, according to that. Right. Who caused it? Was it the manufacturer? Was it the health professionals who were prescribing the product? Or was it the patients who were demanding the products? Who caused it? I mean, the pharmaceutical companies got the big blow, got the axe, but where did the health professionals fit into this? Because they're the ones who prescribe it. Yes. Anyone on that?
Big Pharma, sir.
What is it? Now you can understand why I pulled my cartoon on the bottom right.
Yes,
Both of us,
yes.
Yeah,
And
we
they
are.
also incentivize these things in a lot of instances, including for the physicians who are prescribing them. In
Yeah.
other instances, they're not necessarily super open about the challenges with the stuff that they're producing in terms of the side effects and the potential um for people to become addicted and so on and so forth. And so, yes, I'm going to see Big Pharma as the villain in this at all times to start. Not that other people are not culpable at other levels, but they are the problem.
Yeah. Anybody else who think that is the big pharmaceutical companies, they have to take the big blow because they have deep pockets. Remember the law. The law doesn't go after the small people, The law goes after in something like where compensation matters are concerned, you go over the ones who have big pockets, deep pockets, not the ones who have small pockets.
Right, and that is deliberate, sir, because you have to hit them where it hurts so that they can effect changes. The same thing that's happening now with
Yeah.
Meta
Okay,
and the
right.
addiction issues with the online space.
Yeah. Did anybody read this nice little book which was prepared by one of our own, ex-lecturer of you guys, well, in the MPH classes? He just died recently, very, very sadly, Dr. Tomlin Paul. He wrote a nice little book called Detailing Doctors, which look at the role of drug sales representatives when they come to the doctor's offices and how they try to both make you aware of their products, but also try to influence you to be prescribing their products. So take a look at that little booklet called Detailing Doctors by Dr. Tomlin Paul. Right. So, right. So the big companies. What about this one? A pill has been shown to help keep certain early hard-to-treat breast cancers at bay after initial treatment and findings. The study released over the pill called Lynparza was found to help breast cancer patients, to live longer without disease after the cancer had been treated with standard that and that. Lynparza, marketed by AstraZeneca and Merck, so over there, cost $14,000 per month. And I don't need to tell you that $14,000 per month is about 2.3 million Jamaican dollars. One patient, 1 month. Would you spend that money?
If you have breast cancer, you will. If you can't find it, you will do your best to find it. Breast cancer is a horrible disease.
But after you pay that out, you don't have money to get buried.
No.
You worry about that later, Chris. You need the drugs.
But do you think the government should pay for this for you? Does everybody assume government have deep pockets, you know?
Well,
But
you
if the
just have to
government
pray that
put-
the person had some critical illness or one of
Ah.
those insurance that could cover some of
Yeah.
it.
Well, remember too, when we were dealing with health insurance, we said that health insurance give you a drug limit. They might say your limit for the year is 1 million or 500,000, whatever it is. If you reach the limit, that's it. You're on your own. So even the health insurance companies have a limit beyond which they will not go. Why do we think the government and taxpayers should fund it? So that's something you want to consider. If you think that one is that, look at this one. Look at this one. A baby with a fatal condition had his parents request for the most expensive drug approval. This is the British system. 10-month-old Edward, severe spinal muscular dystrophy. He lacks a protein vital for muscle development. He will receive a new gene therapy called Zolgensma. Cost £1.79 million or 2.2 million US dollars. Jamaica terms, that's 352 million Jamaica dollars. Who should pay for that? So one-of-a-kind medication, what is called genetically modified, just to suit your particular condition. Nobody else will get that. So 352 million, how many hypertensives can you provide for? How many diabetics, glaucoma, arthritis?
Sir, does the medication need to be that expensive?
It's one of a kind. I mean, gene therapy means that you are producing for one person, just a handful of people. That's what you would like to call these orphan drugs. After that, nobody else could use it. So there's no big market.
Oh, so you have to make the brunt of the money up front because it's not like this severe muscular dystrophy happens every day.
Who's going to cover all the costs? Because costs of research and development and all of that.
Just to say, I had seen the a sort of expose from the manufacturer of this drug. And his rationale was that he's helping a small subset of people. And right now, the cost is exorbitantly high, which he acknowledges.
Right.
But, he said the reason why it was this high was for the years of research, etc., that went into developing the drug, the risk they had to take on, as well as the persons who had contributed startup capital towards it. All of that has to be repaid. And the company is hoping that as they continue to turn a profit, they will use those profits to sort of make production cheaper in the future. So he hopes the cost will go down with the success of the drug.
Well, remember too that there's not much room for trials, drug trials in this case, because there's not very many persons you can test it on. All right, so that whatever you're doing inside, you just have to try to get it right. And that's the whole thing about genetic therapy, which we will look at. Okay, so these are some of the things which I just wanted to pull into the mix as we begin to look through this whole matter of the marketplace. And the marketplace is not just from the production side, because that's where I really want to start. Production, the distribution, the procurement decision to purchase, and then the retailing and the prescribing end where the health professionals actually come in. So that's the whole sweep that we want to take a look at, and that's what I call it, the pharmaceutical marketplace. There's some other questions which you want to throw into the mix. Do the guidelines that the WHO have, for rational prescribing, and what is VEN list and all of these kinds of things in order to enhance efficiency in pharmaceutical use, do these restrict your opportunity for getting therapeutic performance for your patients, or do they, give you just the right results for your country, right? Because WHO do have guidelines for rational prescribing and dispensing, and they're the ones who tell countries that you must have what is called your VEN list, vital, essential, and necessary medication. Outside of that, it's really optional. What's driving the opioid epidemic and the abuse of antibiotics, the whole AMR, antimicrobial resistance? What's driving that? And who is responsible? Is it the pharmaceutical company or the ones who were prescribing? Why did it take so long to develop an Ebola vaccine? And why did it take so long, or is it taking so long to come up with medications and vaccines, etc., for all of these neglected tropical diseases? Do you think government should control the price of medication so everybody could get access, or leave it to the open market? You have the money, you can pay for it. You don't have the money, you don't get it. And then if you're going to control the price, whose price are you going to control? Are you going to control the manufacturer price? Because the manufacturer is then going to sell it to the distributor. The distributor is going to pass it on to the wholesaler. The wholesaler is then going to pass it on to the retailer. And the retailer then going to pass it on to you, the patient. So everybody must get something out of it. Whose price should the government control? At the top or at the bottom? The retailer end. Should drug producers who have, spent all their millions on whatever, and they got their patent, should they allow their patent to be taken over before it's concluded? Because patent usually, goes for about 10 or 12 years. Over that period, no other manufacturer is expected or should be able to produce your medication, because you have the sort of patent for that period. After that, it's open, and that's when all the generics and whatever can come in. But if you're dealing with a major condition like HIV, like COVID, like cancer, should you allow patents, or should you allow other manufacturers to produce at reduced prices so that the population can benefit? What about the drug producers who spent the billions, the Pfizer and the Glaxo and the Eli Lilly and the Johnson and Johnson and the AstraZeneca? How are they going to make back their money? If you allow, like the other generic producers to get into the mix, generic producers out of India and China and Brazil and Indonesia and Turkey and other places. Who should pay for these custom designed medications? Orphan drugs, I've said orphan drugs, so that's for a limited number of persons or 1 or 2 conditions only, and not for anything else. That's why it's not a mass market. That's for very selective markets. That's why they're called orphan drugs, because they have very limited appeal or use outside of those particular persons or cases. Who should pay for all of these new genetically customized designer drugs like the child? Should doctors prescribe brand if cheaper bioequivalent drugs are available? Do the drug sales representatives influence prescribing by doctors and by dispensing by retailers? For efficiency, why haven't Caribbean countries pooled their drug demands, as they've done in the smaller Caribbean countries like Grenada, St. Kitts, St. Vincent, Dominica? All of them have come together in one pool so that they can, submit a tender and get better prices, and each one has to get it or has to get the drug on its own. So if they have a pool, then they can have more economies, greater volume, get cheaper prices. Why didn't the other Caribbean countries like Jamaica, Trinidad, Guyana, Barbados, Bahamas, why didn't they join the pool? So that all the Caribbean countries can get better value for their medication. Why? Which is what PAHO Revolving Drug Fund is doing, and which is what on the COVID, what the COVAX came about, when all countries were expected to be part of COVAX, so you could negotiate. So WHO and PAHO, and they could negotiate to get supplies at reasonable prices. If you pool, you can get better value than if you want to do it on your own. But no, we want to do it on our own. Why? What interest, what business interests are stopping us from coming together to get better prices? And do you think AI, artificial intelligence, is going to transform the whole process of drug research, development, production, so that you don't have to spend 10 and 15 years? You don't have to try 15 or 20 different forms of your medication before you get the one that is just right, that is going to give you the efficacy, the potency, the therapeutic value that you could be looking for without the toxicity. And you're going to get this level of stabilization. You're looking for the absorptive property of the medication. You can deal with all the things pertaining to pharmacodynamics and pharmacokinetics, what the drug does to the body, what the body does to the drugs. And you can still have a medication that is a reasonable price medication in the marketplace. How do you get all of these things? How do you get all of these things right? Can AI shorten the process, so you don't have to go through all these trials? And then you just come out with your medication and say, right, this is what AI has allowed us to do. Some key questions to look at when you consider the pharmaceuticals marketplace. Anything there? Anybody want to jump on to raise? I wanted to put in a question there, a couple of questions on like medical ganja. And when the market was opened up and decriminalization, whatever, Jamaica and other Caribbean countries have felt, we know about ganja, lots about ganja, we know all about these medicinal properties. Who is controlling the marketplace for medical ganja? Not the Caribbean countries. It is the Canadians and Poland and Uruguay and Israel and California and these places. So where's the Caribbean in all of this? And the same thing for all of these other medications, all these medicinal plants that we have in the Caribbean, which locally we seem to know all the properties that they have, like guinea hen weed and soursop and cerasee and lemongrass and a range of things. Why haven't we been able to convert these into pharmaceuticals for the mass marketplace? What are we waiting on? So how do we do it? How do we get into the market? Yep. Any queries? Anybody want to raise anything here on that?
Just to say, sir, on the issue of the medical marijuana, it is my impression that we're still perhaps a little bit ambivalent about it.
Yeah.
Certainly in public health.
Yeah.
And where you have that kind of ambivalence, you're gonna have challenges or friction with getting proper regulations passed and a whole system, or the entire system that would take it from production to all of the things while controlling for the public health challenges becomes problematic, precisely because of that ambivalence. We've said we're doing it, but we still, we don't really want to do it. It feels kind of like that.
Yeah. Well, very interesting, in Barbados, I went to a couple of the pharmacies and asked them whether they have medical ganja products, prescription items, not the normal things that you get in a little bottle that you say, this is good for, controlling that, and whatever, which is more like a, sort of a customized market. I mean, a real product for dealing with cancer cases and dealing with epilepsy and dealing with asthma and, all the things that we say that medical ganja is going to help you with, renal problems. I mean, so I went and tried, what products do you have? They said, we don't have any. And I went to the public pharmacies, and the public pharmacies, do you have any medical marijuana? No, we don't. We don't stock these. So I'm like, okay, so where are you going to get your supply from? So I was, and when I was in Jamaica the last month, was it no, a couple of weeks ago when I was there, staying at the hotel, Medallion Hall. Sorry to advertise. I just walked over, right? 2 buildings away was a place called Kaya. Anybody knows Kaya restaurant? And it's a place where you can go and get recreational ganja and other things. Anybody
We know it, sir.
Oh,
We may have heard of it, sir. We may have heard of it.
So
I don't
I'm
know
the
who
adventurer.
knows, but I may have heard of it. May or may not.
Don't try to sell your don't try to hide. Don't try to hide. It's right on Lady Musgrave Road. So so maybe I was the adventurer. So I just went in out of curiosity and out of well, curiosity and probably some sort of naiveness. But I knew exactly what I was going for. So I went in there and I asked them out, what kind of medical marijuana? They said, we do have none. But you have the real product, you can smoke and whatever in here, and you can get some ganja tea, and you can get some of the little things that come in little bottles and salves and ointment and the range of things that you can get very easily. I said, well, where's the real, medical ganja? They said, no, we don't have any. And that's right there. So it's not just that, but so how do we get to production? So where we can start it, why are we concerned about the pharmaceuticals marketplace? But I can tell you we are, primarily because when you think about it, almost 90% of every visit or encounter or consultation between a patient and a health professional is going to lead to a prescription for something. And if you don't want to give the prescription, the patient asks for it. So you're tempted to give the patient something just to keep them quiet and send them out to the office or whatever it is. So a lot of these encounters going to lead to a prescription for medication or something. And medications play a crucial role in healthcare: prevention, treatment, stabilization, rehabilitation, palliation, community health, public health, and individual health. Again, it accounts for probably 10 to 20% of all health spending after you've spent on salaries and compensating workers. Probably pharmaceuticals, medical supplies, and medications, the next biggest item. It takes a lot. It takes a lot to get medications out in the markets, and you have to go through all the research, the trials, you have to go through the production, sales and marketing, distribution. Then you have to make sure that professionals are prescribing it. It's there in the retail pharmacies, they're dispensing. You have to go through all the regulatory process with the Food and Drug Administration, the boards in England, in Canada, in Australia, the European countries, etc. So medications have major health implications. They have major economic implications because they're big employers. They earn a lot of profits for some countries, and nobody's going to give up that so very easily. That's why they don't like the competitors and the generic producers. So you might want them because you get it cheaper, but if I'm the producer, I want my business to be running. The major technological implications, innovation, because that's where you have what is called intellectual property. That's how you get your patent. That's how you have the trade in intellectual property rights agreement managed by the United Nations. All of these play a very crucial role because there's an agreement on patents, and if you break the agreement, you have to pay big money. And more than that, medications have national security implications. That's why under COVID, the government very quickly took charge of the medications, said, look, This has national security implications. If a whole lot of our soldiers and policemen and other key people are going to fall sick and die, who is going to protect us? If people are going to be coming through our borders, the port and the airports, etc., and bringing all kinds of conditions with them that we don't know about, you see, whatever supplies of medication we have, we're going to stock that to make sure we look after our country first, because it has national security and epidemic and pandemic implications. So that's what countries do. So a lot of things going behind medications. Complications, you have safety implications, effectiveness, cost effectiveness. So you really have to put in a lot of effort. Pharmacovigilance against abuse, like in opioids and with, antibiotics and so. Look at adverse effects, and now more and more deal with counterfeit medication and marketplace. And you have to be very, very careful what you produce, because you could cause all these adverse effects, and then you have to consider liability. How much are you going to put aside for this? And then whoever is buying medication for the population, you have to put all of these things from the producer side if you want to get into the production. Like if we want to get into medical marijuana or producing something out of our local medicinal plants like soursop and cerasee and vervain, the vervain plant and guinea hen weed, etc. If we want to do something, how do we consider all of these aspects before we can get into production? And who's going to buy it? Who's going to stock it, to sell it? So all of these are concerns about pharmaceuticals. So we start at the top. Why did Pfizer decide they want to go into drug production? Why did Merck? Why did Abbott? Why did Bristol Myers? Why did companies like Bayer? Or like in Japan, Takeda, Daiichi Sankyo, why did Teva in Israel, why did Ranbaxy or, Dr. Reddy Labs in India or something like that, Moderna, why did these big guys decide to go into medications and not something else? But if you're going to go into medication, you go in there for a reason, not because you really like people. Some of them may claim that. They say it's the human face of medicine, pharmaceuticals. Yes, talk to Big Pharma about it. But it depends very much. Your decision is going to depend on, well, do we have enough scientific knowledge about this particular condition? And is it a serious or a big enough condition that if we put our money in there, we're going to get a good rate of return? Do we have the research capability? What are the trials? Likely demand and profitability, the size of the market. What about the product life? What's about the competitors? How long is our patent protection going to be? If we produce this in another country, like what happened in the US, Pfizer operating in the US and producing, but there's a Pfizer in Canada, and Pfizer can produce it cheaper, but the US will not allow imports from Canada or from Turkey or from some other country where Pfizer is also operating and producing the same products, because they want to maintain market share for Pfizer locally. So you don't want to allow parallel imports of the same company producing cheaper in other places coming into the country and undercutting itself. You have to go look at your market research and my cost effectiveness analysis. Where am I in relation to the competitors? I have to look at my shareholders and ask them, well, do you want me to put money in drugs? Or what about cell phones? Or what about, real estate? Or what about, maybe hotels? What other business choices do I have? So my decisions will depend very much. What about all these rules and regulations? The World Trade Organization, TRIPS, the WHO, with their good manufacturing practices in the US, the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, the PBAC in Canada, Pharmaceutical Board, NICE, National Institute for Clinical Excellence in the UK, and the European Medicine Agencies, EMA, all of these. And even within the Caribbean, of course, we do have our local regulatory boards. And would you easily allow other countries to produce the medication, like what happened in the case of HIV medications? I think I told you about that, how South Africa had to take the case to the UN in order to get HIV medication produced and sold cheaper because there's a major public health hazard for them, HIV, and the big producers were keeping their prices very high and very few people could afford it. So people were dying while medication was available in the richer countries. And so South Africa said, no, we want to break the rules. We want to get the patent out of the way. And the UN temporarily allowed that. That's how you now have India and Brazil and Indonesia and South Africa. These countries can produce generics for some of these medications. And very crucially, I think somebody picked up on that. Depends very much where you're going to launch your product, you know. Right? If you want to go and launch your product in Bangladesh, where the cost is, you have to have a very low price. That's going to be the going international price that you have to run with. But if you go to Switzerland and you launch your product, you're likely to have that's going to be the going price. So you have to make all of these decisions on the industry side, the production side, before you can get it right. Yeah, you have to consider where you are in the marketplace, not just in terms of cost effectiveness, because I think we would have gone through that earlier on when we were looking at cost effectiveness. You have to know where you are in the product cycle, and that's what I mentioned. You see, when you now start, you have all the investments which are made, and you don't have much market share, so you're likely to be running at a loss for the first few years. That's what the graph is showing. Over time, at a startup, you likely run in a loss, but after some time, you capture market share, your cost of production begin to decline, and then you begin to make your surplus. Now you're controlling the market. But over time, other producers get into the mix. And when other producers get into the mix, you're likely to lose market share. And when you lose market share, then you're likely to find that your cost of production have to be higher because you're spending a lot more in marketing. You're being undercut by other companies and other products. And so your earnings are going to decline. And then you might begin to run into loss. Where am I? When I'm doing my market intelligence and market analysis, I want to know over time and monitoring where am I in the marketplace. That's why these companies have drug sales representatives. So they come to you and they go to the pharmacies to check the stocks and to check their shelves. Are you stocking our products? Where are they? Are they visible, not visible? Are they first line products that you're going to be dispensing, or where are they? They come to you in your doctor's or your professional office. All right, do you know about this product? Where is it? I mean, how is my product doing? Are patients wanting it? I mean, what else can we do to boost it? I mean, you have to do that when you're monitoring your sales if you want to stay in the market. So from the production side, profitability, there's a lot of issues you have to consider. This one, of course, is the one that we just ran through in terms of trying to know where you're going to be. What's the best position? You want to be in the best position where your cost is less, but your effectiveness or the likely benefit of using my medication is more. If I'm going to produce at the same cost, then at least I know that, I'm going to get the same effectiveness as my best competitor. If mine is more, then I'm going to get more. The one where you don't want to be is where your cost is highest and your benefits are less than the other. All right, that's something which we did. Liability, and I just threw this in for you to get an idea. What's the kind of liability some firms have encountered in the past? GSK for these medications, Paxil, Wellbutrin, Advair, Avandia. Big settlement because of what? Deceptive marketing. They made claims about their products which were not completely true. Off-label marketing. They began to say that this product can also do other things. Of course, it's not as serendipitous as a very famous product that we now have in the marketplace, GLP-1 products, where it started off as being a product to deal with diabetes, and now the big demand is for weight loss. And there's a big competition now, who is going to produce and capture the market for weight loss. So Ozempic and Wegovy and Zepbound and Mounjaro and the others are hitting the marketplace to make sure that they can capture the market. Now, Pfizer kickbacks for their products, Bextra, Lyrica, Geodon, Zyvox, and this is what they had to really deceptive marketing kickbacks, where they were paying professionals and paying pharmacies to be pushing their products. J&J, Risperdal, Invega, Natrecto, off-label promotion to Abbott Labs, Eli Lilly, Merck, Amgen, AstraZeneca, Actelion, Purdue, OxyContin, deceptive marketing, addiction risk, which they did not fully declare on the pamphlet that they normally have to produce and put inside of the box or whatever it is. Or when you read, the literature on what they are producing, right? It did not tell all the adverse effects and under what kinds of conditions you're going to have these, or all the toxic effects that you have to look forward to. So all of these have to be worked out, known in advance. Somebody has to be reading these dossiers, because when you're going to be procuring medication for the population, you better make sure and read all those dossiers so you know what you're getting into. Because if something happens, you can't always blame the manufacturer. The regulators, the ones who allow it into the country, they're the ones who also have to stand up and put up their hand. They can't say, we did not know. So that's why you have your questions, ask them, put it to them, which is why, in many of our countries, smaller countries where we do not have that capability of all these experts to read all these dossiers and come up with all of the scientific expertise and development of that, which is why we sometimes take the easy route and say that we will only accept a new medication if it has been used consistently for 2 years in the country of origin. So at least, if they're using it, if the US is using it and the UK is using it and the Europeans are using it, it's because their regulatory agencies would have given it a pass. And therefore we say, okay, now we're comfortable using it. Otherwise, on your own, not too sure. So when we want to get into production, think of all of these things. Right. This is the production side. Just a very quick look at the production side, the marketplace, the decision-making, why you want to do it, why you're getting to it. So you can begin to understand what Big Pharma is looking for and how they can get their products and what they have to be conscious of in making their decision to produce or not to produce, to allow you to have medication in the system. So when 90% of patients come to you and you have to prescribe something, you have something which you can give them and be confident that that which you give them is going to help them. Okay. Query, and we do want to query that side of things.
I think just to say, sir, that what I'm getting from you, and perhaps you can correct me, it seems like the only way to rein in Big Pharma is through advocacy and litigation. Are there examples of collaboration? I think in some earlier slides, you may have talked about or raised the question around, sort of governments being involved in the development of pharmaceuticals. Yeah. Is there any evidence of collaboration between Big Pharma and governments that works out to the
they do
public
that,
good?
they do that. And sometimes, remember the whole development, the reason why Pfizer and Moderna and others were able to produce a COVID-19 vaccine within 3 years or 2 years or 3 years or within 18 months or whatever it is. Governments pumped a lot of money into them, They pumped a lot of money to try to get them off the ground because on their own, they were not going to do it. It's going to take too long. So they had to get some sort of, early regulatory approval and seed money. The bank's not going to put in their money. Their shareholders not going to jump in and throw money inside of there, which is why the WHO and other countries are trying to put money into medications for neglected tropical diseases like Ebola, Ebola for a long time. Ebola has been around for a long time. It's only recently they've come up with a medication, a vaccine, in order to deal with the prophylaxis. So then altogether, why did it take so long? Because the big companies saw no profitability, no reason to put their money into that. I mean, they put their money a lot, there's probably a lot more money spent on medications for pets, like cats and dogs and horses and, sorry, I didn't mean to go there.
Okay.
Right. So could we, any more questions? Any more questions? Anything on this? Anybody else want to raise anything? Yes, you understand. Look at it. I mean, that's why I said, don't only look at it from a patient or a government or a professional point of view. Look at it from the production side and try to get into their headspace to understand why are they doing this? Why would they want to get into this, given all of these issues that they have to contend with? This liability drag you through the mud. And when somebody going to accuse you of kickbacks or deceptive marketing or, addiction risk that you did not fully put in your in your dossier or in a little insert that you have to put inside a box or something like that, if you didn't do that, or the price hike in the case of Daraprim and touring chemicals, if you didn't, thing, or copay fraud, which is another side of the whole thing, which we look at when we talk about copays in a short while. Okay. Right. So now we have products. We have products. We have burden of disease. We know what people are suffering from: morbidity, mortality, long-term injury, etc. In our countries, we have a whole range of conditions. People need help. Medications can help. How do we decide on which medications we want to get? The right drugs, vaccines, biologicals, the right quality, the right quantity for the right people at the right time, and of course, at the right price. Of course, we also have to make decisions as to what is the right form or presentation of the product, whether we want it, like a patch, or we want it like a tablet, or we want capsule, or we want liquid, or we want injectable, or we want it, like what children can use, easily. How do we want it so that it's going to be easily accepted, easily absorbed, and stable? You don't want something that only has a stability of 1 month or 2 months. You want it to be there, stable and still potent for, probably 18 months. All of these have to go into the decision making on the production side, and you now have to decide for your country what is the best form we want it in. So not just the right drugs to treat the range of conditions, and which conditions, which drugs, the right quantity, with the right people. Will you be spending a lot of your money on getting medication for 1 or 2 people, or 1 or 2 very big or catastrophic cases, when you have 300,000 hypertensives in the population and 250,000 diabetics in your population, etc.? Would you want to be buying medication for 10 people or 50 people? Right quantity, right quality, right people, and you want to get it at the right time, at the right price. How do you put all of these things together so that your procurement or your purchasing decisions can give you value for money? Well, you're sitting down in your office, or you in charge of, medications in the country. You're the tell you or your committee that this is what you are responsible, and you have to determine, given the list, given the burden of disease in my country and the forecast I'm making for the next year, what is a formulary? What is a list of drugs I think will be necessary for my country, given the range of conditions, the number of people affected, the quantities that we need to procure. What is the range of medication? And for each one of these conditions, you have to work out what is the drug treatment protocol. You know, what is the you know, how many grams, how many cc's, what is the form that is going to take, how many tablets or whatever it is for the month, for the patients, what is the severity of the condition, what is your first level medication, your second level medication, what medications can only be prescribed by certain professionals. You have to work out these as your treatment protocols for each one of these so that you can get this right. And then you're going to determine, right, I'm going to get the medication. Where am I going to get it from? Quality, availability, that's a key factor. So then you have to make sure that you've done your projections right so that you can score or search the marketplace. Who has it? So when you provide in your tender, you know that you have time. You don't want to give producers outside there or suppliers 1 month and say, we want it in 1 month. Can't do that. You have to give yourself a reasonable lead time, consider cost and revenue factors. So you put in all of this information into a request, into what is called a tender. A public tender is really a long sort of Excel sheet, or now it's all electronic, an Excel spreadsheet that tells you what condition, what medication, how much, what form, what presentation, you know, you're looking for, over what time period, and what quantity you're looking for. And you know, more so, you put that out there for tenders so that producers and distributors, wholesalers will look at it and they put in their bids. Oh yes, we can supply these, or we can supply this, and we can supply this on these terms at these prices and whatever. Now, who do you invite to submit a bid? Do you invite international suppliers, or do you leave it to your local wholesalers, producers, who all qualified suppliers, or do you have a short list of suppliers who have been there with you over the years and you want to give them preference? So you say, I want to go with these. How do you make sure that every producer, every supplier of medication, all right, depending on their production facilities, they have passed or they have been accredited by the WHO? Good manufacturing practice, so that you are assured of quality without that GMP certificate from WHO, because you have a whole lot of producers all around the world. They can say, yes, I can give you all of that much cheaper and everything, and you know, within the time frame that you want, and all of these things. But are they accredited? How do you ensure quality? So then you go, haven't received the bids, then you have made your selection. So you have your committee who's going to select, you know, which one is going to be the one that win the supply contract. And then you start negotiating contract quantity, price, terms of payment, timing, delivery schedules, every month, every 2 months, every 3 months, or whatever it is, which medications, what amount. You know, and that it depends very much on which supplier can provide that for you. Because, and this is where small countries face a big disadvantage. I mean, these big guys like Pfizer and whoever, you know, dealing with small countries and small volume of, you know, quantities that you want, that doesn't really make sense for them. So they leave it to distributors and suppliers, you know, to take charge of that. And, you know, the ones who are representatives in their country. Because with small size and frequent orders, they don't like that. They're like single large orders. So when they start up their machines and they start producing in batches, you know, they can produce millions of tablets, of millions of bottles at one time, rather than 10,000 for Jamaica, or 2,000 for Montserrat, or maybe 500 for St. Kitts. You know, doesn't make sense. And the terms of payment that you're going to get depend very much on your payment record. If Jamaica has a bad payment record, they owe these suppliers and they owe these wholesalers and they owe these manufacturers for medication that they did not pay on time. You give them 30 days or 180 days or 90 days or whatever, and then, you come begging for more time because you don't have the money. They say, oh, this is your record of payment. Then you see we put you at the back of the list, back of the class. So you must make sure you have a good payment record if you're going to get good deals and good contracts outside there. And let's assume that you get all of these things right and you have a supplier. Then what's the best that you're looking for from your procurement side? Well, the best that you're looking for that you can get from your supplier is that you get what is called a maximin contract. Now, a maximin contract means that you want them to guarantee a price. This price is going to hold for the contract period, a year or 2 years or whatever it is. What is the minimum? And the manufacturers or the suppliers will tell you, well, we will give you this maximum price or this best price if you can guarantee a minimum requisition or order. So I'm going to give you, for example, $5 per tablet if you order at least 10,000 tablets for the year or for the month or whatever it is. If you order more tablets, I still give you the $5. But you see, if you order less than the 10,000 per month or whatever it is, then I will change the price from $5 to $8 or $10 or $15. So if you want the best price, if you want my maximum best price I can offer you, you must also guarantee me a minimum requisition. And that's why you have to go all the way back to the top. What is my burden of disease? What is my forecast for the year? How much will I need? Have I spoken to my doctors and the pharmacists, etc.? So whatever we have purchased, that's what they're prescribing. Sometimes you have things in stock and the doctor is not prescribing what you have. They say, no, we don't like that. That's not how you do it, because then you're going to end up with a lot of medication on your hands. And then in the next round, you're not going to procure or purchase that, the amount that you had agreed to purchase, because the prescriber is not doing what they wanted, that they're supposed to be doing. Or when it comes to dispensing, then the retailers do, the pharmacists doing their own thing. The whole thing about first in, first out, or last in, first out, or whatever it is, might be dispensing what is right in front of them. Do they go to the back of the shelves in order to get the product where, the expiry dates may be very close, or do they take what is close to them? And which products? So there are a number of reasons where you want to make sure that you get a maximum product like this price contract like this, if you want to get a best price, so that, you get a best market price, a maximum price, but you have to also give me a minimum requisition or order. If not, then things can change. And for precaution, because, you have all number of reasons why some producers or contracted parties may not be able to supply the medication on time or whatever it is. And instead of having to go to the open market where the prices are very much higher, you might have, for precaution, you have more than one supplier. So 80% of the product may come from your best price contractor or supplier, and the next 20% might be from another one, or maybe 10% from another one, and 10% from another one that, not as favorable prices and terms of procurement, but it gives you a precaution just in case the supplier run into problems, just in case there's shipping problems, just in case, like if there's a war and there's disruption, just in case, for example, the workers in that particular manufacturer went on strike or something like that, and, or the government would have ordered them to produce something for the government because of some priority in the national community where they're operating from, and they, put you in the second line, so that you, just for precaution, you want to cover yourself. So procurement decision, this is how you begin to think through it. So a bit more complicated than it looks like, but you're the one who's going to be in the middle of this. You sit down in the committees, or you're in charge of the committee, or you're running the show where medication and procurement is concerned. How do you make sure you get value for money? Another aspect, because I mean, you have all these medications coming into the country and being used by thousands of patients and being prescribed and dispensed and all of these things, and you spend a lot of money. How do you make sure you do your monitoring, you do your assessment? Did I get value for money from spending on this medication? And that's why from time to time, you have to do your reviews and your audits, not just your pharmacovigilance for adverse effects, but you need to ask the question, am I spending money but not getting value for money? Are these products doing what we want to do? We get a quality medication. And then when you begin to look at it, you're going to find that in your whole system of procuring medications, that about 70 to 75% of your expenses may be on a small group of medication, on 15 to 20% of medication, because your cancer drugs, your dialysis medications, your psychiatric medications, for example, may be very costly, even though you find that you may not be having a lot of these medications. So a lot of your expenditure goes as against for hypertension or probably some diabetic supplies or something like this. So if you want to manage your money better, or the Ministry of Finance say, well, you see, we're going to cut your budget by 15%. And the Minister of Health and the PS tell everybody, well, you see in your budget for the next year, this is what is going to happen. And they tell you in the drug committee, well, this is how the ball runs. This is a show on the road. So you have to find ways of cutting your claims or your expenses for the year. What does it do? You look at the big cost items. What can I save? Can I find cheaper alternatives? Can I negotiate lower prices? Or can I do my reviews? Did the doctors prescribe what we have? Did the retailers or the pharmacists, dispense what we have? Did patients use it properly or abuse? The patients just collect it and just come back next month and they say, well, we didn't. Or look, we have all of these which are unused, because patient utilization behavior also has to be considered, because that patients, bank, hoard, or sometimes just, pile up a lot of medications at their houses without using it. Antibiotics, they get 1 week supply or whatever, and after 2 days, I feel good. No need to utilize the rest. The rest of it just stay over there, and all kinds of things can happen with that. Or other medication, they go doctor shopping, go to that clinic or that doctor or that outpatient department, and they get that, and they go to another one and they get that, and they stock up. So you have to do your prescribing, dispensing, utilization reviews to see who are the outliers, whether there's abuse. And then you do another category of medication where you spend about 15 to 20% of your money and just a small volume. And then you may find that a small amount of your expenditure is on a large volume of medication for high cases, high volume cases, like your hypertension and your diabetes and your arthritis and, cholesterol problems and these things. So you have to do your auditing, value for money analysis. This is what we call your ABC type of analysis to try to see if you get value for money. All part of the pharmaceutical marketplace, all part of trying to get it right, because you're spending a lot of money on this. Right, so we got it right. So we have the production and we, have the procurement. We've done our best. We have that now. So we now want to get it to the patients. It now has to be sold at the retail end. And I'll come to the retail end. Sorry, before I run to this part over here. Anything over here? Anybody want to bounce off me again? Think that you.
Yes, sir. I wanted to know, so who will be conducting these audits? Would it be like the SMO, the medical officer of health, or
Yep.
or it would be the NHF doing their own internal audit, seeing that they're separate?
They can do that. They can do that. You can have your team of people, or you can have an independent agency coming and do it for you. If you don't have the skills locally, enough of it, then you have a team coming from, you get a team coming from outside to do it. So this
So okay, so you contract a team.
Yep, so this is where the capacity development. Capacity development is not only in terms of selection, capacity only is also in monitoring. Capacity is also in terms of tracking quality. Capacity is also in terms of doing the audit, right? And dealing with after adverse effects and all of these things. And it's not only, I mean, that's why the role of the health professional, and I keep using the word health professional as against just the physician or the nurse, because there's a lot more persons, a lot more skills, and a lot more capacity you need than just immediate medical capability, if you're going to get this right. Okay, so you have to have your trained people who are getting into all of this mix. Okay, so now we have all of these things in place. We've produced Big Pharma, gotten the act, we got a good deal with Big Pharma, we have our contract, we're now procuring medication, and the patient now going to get it. So at what price to the patient? In the private market, we know the private pharmacies do their own procuring, whoever they procure from. Just hope they, within the formulary, they have to indicate, that these are the medications within the formulary. We have to stay within the formulary. Outside of that, customs can stop it. Outside of that, ministry can go and seize products with police help, of course. All right, so then you have to make sure you do that. So the process of it, but where you buy them from, and we're hoping that the quality checks and whatever would have been done, and they also would have read the dossiers and have the inserts, and they can vouch for the quality of the medication. So that's what comes through the port, and you want to make sure that your customs people know what they're looking for. And the next thing, all kinds of things coming through the port, and you can't tell where they're coming from or whatever. And a number of things which could go wrong. So your first major point where you need to have control is at the point where it is going to be coming into the country. And if you get that wrong, then I don't need to tell you what's going to happen. I think a few years ago when I was working in Jamaica, the ministry found out that people were selling prescription medication on the streets. You go downtown, put a Charles Arcade and, in the marketplace, Coronation Market, etc. And people had prescription medication being sold. You can get that and you can get that. Where did they get it from? Are they valid medication? Of course, the bad thing that the ministry did is the ministry seized the medication and wanted to take them to court. But then they realized, the court said, but you, ministry, has no power of seizure or storing the medication, stocking. This becomes evidence. It's only the police which can do that. So you have to start over. I don't know if the law has changed to allow the ministry people, inspectors and whatever, to go and seize medication or to go into a pharmacy and seize stuff. I don't know if the law has changed to allow you to do that, but that's something you have to bear in mind. So take these prescription items. So the patient now, we're not getting to the patient level. What is empty? The bottle of the patient, and 1 month worth of groceries. What is it worth in medication? When I have to balance, should I get my medication or should I pay for my groceries? What about who bears the burden of cost? This medication that we're getting, one of the side effects of this medication is something that's called bankruptcy. All right. In the private marketplace, of course, when the private pharmacies.
Sorry, so you had spoken about procurement, unless I missed it.
Yeah, we did procure. All of this is procurement.
Okay.
Procurement is a contracting process and a decision process. Now, this is at the government level. At the pharmaceutical level, I mean, you determine, the private pharmacy, you determine who, which companies you're going to procure the medication from, the wholesalers or which suppliers. Do you go abroad outside the country, or you think the local domestic wholesalers can provide you with all the products that you want for your private pharmacy? So the private procurement decision is quite different from at the national level. You still have to go through a systematic process to make sure you get the best value for money for your medication, but it's not as systematic and, complicated as if you have to procure for the entire country. It's just for your pharmacy. So you can determine, where you get your medication from, who am I purchasing from, manufacturers, wholesalers, distributors, third parties, brokers, or whatever, which countries, at what price, what terms, etc. You can determine what is the mix of supplies you're going to get. You're going to get your brands, your generics, and your OTCs, especially in the private pharmacies. That's a big part. In fact, there are many private pharmacies who tell you that they make more money from OTCs than from prescription medication. They make more money from herbal supplies and from vitamins and from all these health drinks and all of these things. And then now pharmacies are getting into all kind of electronics and gift cards and juices and, snacks and a range of things, as well as prescription items. And now you have pharmacies in supermarkets, where you can get all your stuff, one-stop shopping, as it is generally called. So, when you look at that, the private pharmacy, make all these decisions yourself. No government make these decisions for you, except the government determines the formulary. And you determine what prices you are going to charge. You procure, you know what is your acquisition cost, and then you fix your markup. We now call this a cost plus price the patient has to pay. You fix your markup, and then you are going to charge that for patients or coming with their prescriptions to get the items. Sometimes in some places, and I'll show you how this works out, sometimes the pharmacist is going to charge a dispensing or counseling fee. Because remember, some of the medication has to be mixed. Some of them, the package has to be broken. Not all of them come in a prescribed bottle, or all of them come in a fixed package, 30 tablets, 5 milligrams or 2.5 milligrams, so a monthly supply. So it's easy like that. So they have to break the bulk, or you have to mix or whatever. They have to go into the back and do that mixing and then come back to the front and break it down and then give it to you. Should they get or sometimes they have to counsel patients. Patients sometimes don't always go to the doctor or the specialist, GP or the specialist or the nurse practitioner or wherever it is, or the clinic. They go to the pharmacist and ask them, well, what can I take for this? Or sometimes the health professional at the other end, the prescribing agent, might say, well, you take this, but when you go to the pharmacy, you have to ask the pharmacist, well, how am I really going to take this? And the pharmacist has to take some time to counsel you. Now, that is professional advice. Should the pharmacist be getting paid for that? Many countries, yes, they want to be paid for that, because the pharmacists say, we have been trained just like doctors and other groups, we are professionals just like them, and we counsel just like them, and therefore we should get a fee for that. So it's not just a dispensing fee for breaking the product. We should also get a counseling fee. And that's a big part of the discussion and negotiation which has taken place in the more developed countries. And then, of course, you, the private pharmacy, can determine whether you give any discounts to particular groups. Like, for example, say, oh, we like elderly patients to come in here. We have a discount for these things. On Thursdays, we give discounts to these particular groups, okay? Or, this insurance company, when you come, guys, we're going to give you preferences in terms of particular discounts for your thing, but not for other people, something like that. Or for these particular medications, and not all discounts across the board. Because, well, we have discounts, but only for diabetic medications. Or we have a discount, but you see, it's only for arthritis medications. And who knows, what's the reason for giving a discount? Maybe because the expiry date for some of these medications may be coming up very quick, or you found an alternative source of supply that's going to give you at better prices. So you offer discounts. I mean, what goes into the mind or the decision-making of the private pharmacist, is entirely up to them. So you have to talk to some of them and work out what is it they do in order to have the prices that you see, the terms of payment for what you see over there, and all of that. Okay, so then of course we know this from our early lecture on what takes place in the market. There's a price. If the price is high, then demand is likely to be low, and if the price is low, demand is likely to be high. And the reverse happens in the case of supply, and somewhere along the line, then you're going to have an equilibrium price which equates supply and demand. If you have the money and you can pay the price, then you get it. Your demand is satisfied. If you don't have the money and you can't pay for it, then the market tells you, sorry, can't help you. So that's the private market. Right. But of course, we do know, like in the case of Jamaica, most Caribbean countries, the UK, Canada, and other places, the government is involved in pharmaceuticals. The government is involved in medications, and the government can procure, and the government has its own pharmacies, and they can send you to their pharmacies, and the government can cover all the cost of the medication, only what is in stock over there. Anything outside of that, that is not in the government vendor list, they say, no, you have to go to the private pharmacy and get it and pay over there. So then that's the restriction that you have. But the government can procure, so they can offer you all the medications at no cost at the point of service. Doesn't mean that it's free. Government still have to pay for it. But at the point of service, the patient, you don't have to pay anything. So that's something which can happen. Or sometimes, you have a user charge, a small user fee, like what happens in some countries. Like, as I said, in Grenada, St. Kitts, Antigua, and these places, you can have user fees. So there's partial payment for the medications by the patients. Or for particular medication, government will say, well, we don't really have that in stock, but if you want us to get it, you'll have to pay something for it. So not all medications in government pharmacies may be free. Now in Jamaica, of course, with no abolition of user fees, you have generally zero cost for medications in the public pharmacies. Of course, we know that you do have drug serve, and we do know that not all government pharmacies can do everything on time. Many times you have a shortage. Many times, for example, the pharmacy closes at a time when you are not around, where you can't go there, you can't get time. So you have to go to the private. Or many times you have long waiting list. Or if it's not available, you have to go back 2 times and 3 times in order to get the medication. So problems in public pharmacies means that governments sometimes have to contract private pharmacies to cover medications for public patients. And that's what you have in the National Health Fund. That's what you have in another one in Barbados called the Barbados Drug Service, the one in Trinidad called the Chronic Disease Assistance Program, the one in Bahamas called the National Prescription Drug Plan, the one in the US with Medicaid, and Canada called the Pharmaceutical Benefits Program, etc., where public money of government agencies are covering the cost of medications under contract, or most of the cost of the medication in private pharmacies. So these are contractual arrangements which can also exist because the government pharmacies themselves are unable to meet the demand. Now, if you have a contract with these private pharmacies, it's a legal contract, like in the case of NHF, Barbados, and Trinidad, then you have to work out what is the payment or reimbursement pattern. How am I going to pay you? And there are different ways you can pay them. It's not a single payment method. You can have what is called a cost plus arrangement, like what they have in Australia, Barbados, Bahamas, and I'll show you how that works out. Or you can have a case like what happens in Trinidad. Government purchases all the medication. Government distribute the medication to the pharmacy. So they don't have to be involved in procurement, and they don't have to be involved in warehousing. Government does all of that for them. Pharmacy just put in an order and the government supplies all of these. And pharmacies just dispense to public patients when they bring their prescription. And for each dispensing item, they get a fixed payment for the prescription. Pharmacists don't fix the charges. That charge is fixed by contract because government buys the drugs for them and government gives it to them. So all they're doing is dispensing. managing and dispensing, or a little bit of counseling, and that's where they get a fixed payment on the thing, and that's a different way of paying them. In Barbados, Bahamas, they have a different payment method. And in Jamaica, with the National Health Fund, they have a different payment method. Jamaica doesn't buy medication for the private pharmacies. I don't think they do it. I mean, under JADEP, they did, but I'm not too sure if the JADEP program is still running as originally designed in 1996, or what is all converted and changed into part of the National Health Fund. I know you still have JADA patients, but all of them are being referred to join up with the National Health Fund. Under the National Health Fund, the NHF doesn't buy medication from pharmacies. The NHF has a list of medication, a list of conditions. The National Health Fund does its market analysis, market reviews, find out what are the bioequivalent medication for treating conditions, find out what is the most cost-effective price, or the best available price, and that is the price that the NHF is going to pay the pharmacy for. So the pharmacy could buy or procure on their own whatever medication they want to treat with hypertension. But you see, the NHF, this is the medication we will pay for, and this is the price we will pay for. That is what we call the reference price. If you, the patient, go to your doctor and your doctor prescribe an item that is not the reference drug, and you go to the pharmacy and say, well, you know, my doctor prescribed this one, could be, you know, this other medication that doctor thing, then if the price for that medication is different from the best available market price or the reference price for the medication that NHF determines, then you, the patient, pay the difference. If it's higher than the reference price, like if the NHF reference price is $100, but the medication the doctor prescribed for you is $250, and you go to the pharmacy, the NHF will pay the pharmacy the $100. But you, the patient, now have to find the next $150 to pay the pharmacist. And that's how the reference market price works, where we will pay up to this amount, no more. If the price is beyond that, you, the patient, have to pay. So NHF does not guarantee it's going to pay everything for you, only up to this price. And that's the difference between the NHF and the Trinidad system, or the government procuring and paying a fixed amount, and the Barbados and the Bahamas system that you can look at. Right, and then you can compare. I put this down if you really want to dig in a bit further into the operations and how they design these different drug plans in Barbados, Jamaica, Trinidad, Bahamas, etc. And you can see a number of factors determining how they set up their plans, and they all set it up quite differently. In Jamaica, we know the NHF, and before that was JADEP, but because JADEP is now being absorbed by the NHF almost completely, I'm only looking at the NHF side. NHF is the law, is legislated, you have to be registered with a condition, you get a unique card. It's a new agency managing it called the National Health Fund. They cover 16 conditions the last time I prepared. I think now they're covering about 28 conditions. NHF gets its money from tax government, putting in money inside of there, which they collect from NIS deductions and from other taxes. NHF doesn't procure the medication. It leaves to the pharmacist to go and procure the medication. NHF only pays up to the best market price or the reference price.
I have a question, sir.
Yeah.
If they leave it up to the open market, so the drugs that are in the drugstores, at the hospitals and in the health centers, who procure those then?
I think those still come under the government. So, except for drug sale, which is being managed by the NHF itself. So NHF has to procure those for them. NHF procures the medications for the public pharmacy. So that's a different arrangement than the contract which NHF has with the private pharmacies. What I'm looking at over here is with the private pharmacies. So NHF has these other activities. I mean, when NHF started, NHF did not have all of these other functions. Over time, the government loaded the NHF with all of these other functions. Procure medication for public pharmacy, take charge of drug serve, hire pharmacists and whatever. That was not the original design for the National Health Fund.
All right, I know they're doing
One
things
was
outside of
different.
pharmaceutics
Only
like
contract
the
with private
Hecons and
pharmacies
stuff.
and pay them best market price or reference price. NHF
Hello? Hello? Is it my internet?
No, not hearing you.
Not hearing him neither. He probably drop
All right.
off.
Sorry, it's on my side. It's on my side. All right. So yes, you have, can you see the slide?
No, sir, you can reshare. I'm interested to find out why we're the only one country in the Caribbean with a copay and the others have none.
Okay,
Even though
sorry,
it's a
can you
low
see it?
copay still,
Can you
but
see it now? Can you see it now? The slide?
not yet.
Oh. Oh, it's still not on, still not there? Okay, can you hear me now? Am I back on? So I can share?
Yes, sir, hearing you.
All right, so this is where we were. Let's
Yes,
open it.
sir, seeing.
Let's open it up from current slide. Sorry. Right. So we're just running. Why does your NHF have a co-payment? You have to ask them. I mean, the team of people who are doing this as the research, the mini research project, you can find out why do they have a risk of co-payment while other countries do not. And I'm sure NHF will give you a very valid reason. All right, you can ask them. You can ask them. So I'm not going to take away from your research findings. Okay. And so of course, does NHF have specified limits? I mean, all of these are different features and different aspects of the plan that you can look at when you're comparing this one as against that one. And does NHF, of course, NHF has online real-time claims processing. Not all the countries have that. And NHF has a health promotion component, and all the other countries, not all of them have that. And you can compare that with all of the other countries. What conditions they're covering? Well, you can run through that on your own. Not all of them cover all the conditions, and NHF is well ahead of them. Now, the pricing arrangement, this is what we are looking at over here. How is it the pricing or the payment arrangement differs? Right, NHF Jamaica pays what is called a reference drug pricing based on the best available market price of the bioequivalent medication. Bioequivalent means it's just as effective as any other medication, the best one in the marketplace. That's bioequivalent. And what's the best price? Because not all of them will have the same prices, but especially when you have competing medications. So what's the best available price for the bioequivalent medication? That's what they're going to pay. And NHF generally pays up to 95% of this, leaving you a small co-payment because, and maybe I shouldn't give you the answer, you should find it out from the research team. But NHF feels that you should never cover 100% of the cost of something for people. They will abuse it. So trying to guard against abuse. That's why even for the reference price, they will pay up to 95% and you pay the next 5%. For the costs or the medication which are above the reference price that you and your doctor or the prescriber would have worked out, then the copay is going to be much more than 5%, maybe 60% sometimes. And the choice of the drug by the member and the doctor leads to other copays above the 5%, and that's what we were mentioning. In Trinidad, they have a different arrangement for the payment. As we said, Trinidad, the government procures all the medication, puts it in the government warehouse, and then the private pharmacies requisition or order medication based on how quickly the stock are being sold out. The CDAP, or the Chronic Disease Assistance Program in Trinidad, the private pharmacies which are contracted, they send in their order. Government trucks move around and provide them the medication. So now the pharmacies have it, and the pharmacies can dispense to the patients when the patients show up there with their prescription. You must come with a prescription. And for filling a prescription, for one prescription item, you get a single fixed payment of $10, which is about $1.80 US dollars for the prescription item from the medications, which are CDAP only for the program. And the pharmacist cannot sell the CDAP program to any other non-CDAP member, only for those who come with a prescription on the CDAP form. You are supposed to fill it in order to get your $10 or 180 or whatever it is. $10 Jamaica, 180 is going to be like about 300, not 300, about $270. Sorry, 270 Jamaica dollars. All right, Trinidad dollars to that. Yeah, so then the pharmacy, the private pharmacy have to be very careful, because if the auditors come in and they find that you have been selling these medications to non-CDAP members, you can be charged, you can be delisted, you can be taken to court. In the Trinidad system, there's no co-payment. No co-payment by the patients. So they get the medication, the government buys, government warehouse, government distribute, government pays the bill. And the patient doesn't have to pay anything, just show up and get the medication. That's how the Trinidad system operates. And then the team which is doing the mini research, if you do in Jamaica, you're doing the NHF, and you're doing Trinidad, you're going to come up with more things than I can explain and indicate over here.
So, sir, how does Trinidad gain income from the private pharmacies, or they don't? They just make it provide them with the job so that the patients have more access.
Exactly. How does Trinidad government benefit, or the country benefit? From two things. Because the government controls the procurement, government controls the price. When the government put in a tender and they get the supplies coming from wholesalers and whoever it is, then the government knows the price, and the governments get a cheaper price than the private pharmacies. So the government get a government price, which is cheaper than the private pharmacies. Government knows the price. And because government fixed the payment, government knows exactly how much money they have to spend. And because government would have procured the medication, the government can be assured of quality of the medication, because that was what their formulary committee would have determined. When the private pharmacies are procuring their medication, you don't know where they're getting it from on their own. You have no way of checking on that unless you want to go and look at all the medication. But if you procure from the government side, they're much more conscious of quality. So you get a better price, you know the quality, and therefore you can fix how much you're going to pay them. And that's what the country benefits. That's what the government can control that system. NHF has a little less control because of the flexibility that the private pharmacies have to procure their own medication. But the level of control that the NHF has is through this pricing arrangement. We will only pay for bioequivalent formulary medication, cost-effective medication, up to this amount. That's where the control is for the NHF. How does Barbados get control? And Barbados has a slightly different arrangement, but felt probably similar to what the Bahamas has. Where generally what they do is that you have, so I'm going to look, I mean, the Barbados one is more specific in terms of like this. And generally what the Bahamas and what Canada and Australia and some of these other countries do is that, they know what is it the pharmacy is going to procure the medication for. Because, like in the case of Barbados, you would have negotiated the terms. So you know what is the cost of the medication. So you put all of this into what is called a monthly supply. For this medication, and some of these medications can be really quite cheap, I mean, like some of the aspirin or whatever you buy in bulk, that's really very cheap. And in Jamaica dollars, it look like a lot, but in other terms, it could be very, very cheap. And so Barbados has a band. Canada has a band or a range. The Bahamas has a range. If the monthly supply of the medication is going to cost this amount, then we are going to give you the cost of the medication. Let's say midpoint, it ranges from 1 cent to $2. The midpoint cost is about $1 for the monthly supply. The reimbursement formula, I'm going to give you a $5 fee plus your cost. And therefore, this is the total amount I'm going to give you. $6. You make a profit altogether in that. And this is the amount of profit you can make. And then you go to another band and another band and another band. What you find altogether is that in Barbados, they have a variable dispensing fee. That's where the $5, $7, $12 come in. But what you're going to find is that the higher the cost of the medication, the lower the margin or the markup I'm going to allow you. And this is clearly brought out over here in the case of like in Canada or in the case of Bahamas or Australia, where you see the low price medication or the low cost medication to get a monthly supply. This is the markup we allow you, 100%. We give you a dispensing fee, a fixed fee. So we give you the markup, we give you dispensing, we give you your cost. So that for something that is costing $2.50, you get $10. And you can see if my profit is $7.50, then that's a 300% profit margin on my cost. Because you get markup, you get a dispensing fee at the same time. For another range, where your cost for the monthly supply is about $12.50, you get a markup, but it's only a 50% markup I allow you. And you get a fixed dispensing fee. So therefore, the total payment is $23.75. Your profit payment or your profit that you make is $11.25, expressed as a percentage of your cost is going to give you in the 90s. And anything above that in Bahamas, they have, I say, 3 range or 3 bands. Barbados has 5 bands. Bahamas has 3 bands. So then you can look at that. Then because the cost is higher, then I will allow you a smaller percentage markup. If I allowed you a 100% markup and something costs you $50, then you're going to add $50 to that. Then I have to give you, $100. That's not how it works out, especially when you consider volume and the number of patients who you have to deal with. So the higher the cost, the lower the markup, and the lower the cost, the higher the markup. And when you look at your percentage or margin of profitability, you can see how it varies. And that's what you look at in terms of how the different types of cost and payment methods are used for the same types of arrangement where government is contracting private pharmacies. Different countries do it differently. And you can work out and see which one provides the best value. And that's what we hope to hear from our mini research team. You're going to tell us which one is good, which one is bad, which one you prefer. Right, ready, right. We're still in the marketplace. I mean, we've dealt with it from the producer end. What are the factors you take into account? dealt with it from the procurement purchasing end. What is the purchasing and procurement decisions alike, and we now dealt with it at the retail or the patient end, and how it is the patient interact with the marketplace over here. It's not only private market, how does the government really get into the mix, and what different types of arrangements you have with prior pharmaceuticals in the marketplace. Right. Which then brings me to this slide over here, which again, the mini research team, if you want to evaluate, comparing Jamaica with Trinidad, with Barbados, with the Bahamas, and their plans, what are the kinds of things you want to compare? What is the strength in the Trinidad program? What is the weakness in the Trinidad program? And the same for Jamaica, and the same for Barbados, and the things. So you can, take a look at these and see whether you agree with them or not. Who has more cost control? Who has limits? Who make use of co-pays? Who has more drug choice, for example? Who is better at controlling reimbursement, etc.? Who has more control over membership and utilization? Right, all of these are different factors you might want to consider when you're comparing these drug plans with each other.
Sarah, so where you say copay is a weakness for the others, but then for Jamaica, you say it might deter some patients as a weakness. So I guess it can be twofold then.
It can be depending on what is the size of the copay. Remember, Jamaica copay varies from 5% for the reference price to 60 or 80%, depending on your choice of medication. These other countries, you don't have much choice of medication, because that's what the government would have decided the pharmacies should be selling. And what you find altogether is that the copay is limited, like in Barbados or like in Bahamas has no copay. Trinidad has no copay. Barbados, I think, has it. Yes, Barbados recently, Barbados introduced a small copay, which is a dispensing fee. All right, they're generally now asking patients or members to pay for that, but previously there was no copay at all. So you can have a copay sometimes, they don't have a copay, depending on what objective you are trying to achieve. That's my view. You don't have to maintain that view. You, in doing your analysis, you might have a different view, but this is what I consider to be strengths and weaknesses. Right, my last slide. I know we talked a lot, considered a lot, went on a big tour, from production to all of these things, all the way down over here to procurement, to auditing. How do we put all of this together? How do we manage? You're in charge of controlling, managing pharmaceuticals in the country. Government looking to you for expert advice. How do I get value for money? So I make sure that we get the right medication at the right time, the right quality, the right quantity, the right people, and all of these things. And this is where an integrated approach. You have to look at it from the top all the way around like a circle. Look at your burden of disease, do your analysis, do your forecast, what is it we need, what are the selection, drug selection and the treatment protocols. Doctors must be in line, pharmacists must be in line with these. So prescribing and dispensing are in line with the protocols. You look at your procurement arrangements, how you deal with that, how you negotiate them, what about the transport? Because you could lose a lot of money in transport and warehousing if you don't warehouse properly. If you're not transporting under the right conditions and not storing under the right conditions, they have to pay close attention to that. Otherwise, you could lose a lot of money, not just in spoilage and breakage and whatever, but something called pilferage. You can lose a lot of your supplies. So you have to pay attention to that. And then, the requisition and orders coming from the government pharmacies or the private pharmacies which are attached to you, and you're dispatching. Prescribing, dispensing, reimbursement of the pharmacies, what kind of systems you have for paying them. Is it online, real-time system, or is it paper system? How do they submit their bills? How do they get paid? Do they get checks? Do they get, electronic transfers in their account? All of these have to be worked out. What about the pharmacovigilance? quality medications coming in, quality assurance, testing, periodic testing, or do you believe everything the manufacturers tell you? Or do you have your own systems for periodic testing? Select something from the shelf. Let me test this and see whether this is the real thing or whether it's counterfeit. And then to get value for money, you have your audits and reviews. And then you put all of that together. You go all the way back to the top for the next year or the next 2 years. And you start again with your burden of disease analysis. And you come all the way around. End to end. Pharmaceutical management, integrated approach is what you're looking at. That's why you need a team of people. And it's not just one professional, one to do that. You need a team of people to help you to work through all of these things if you're going to get the best value. And that's pharmaceuticals, that's the marketplace, that's the economics, the other side, which I want you to look at. As again, just looking at the therapeutic aspect. Somebody come to you with a condition, you prescribe something, that's it. Let's pay attention to all that goes into that prescription. And that's what we try to do. Right, that's it for me. Anybody want to raise anything there? No,
That's
you okay with
a good point you brought up where should be integrated with the procurement and so forth because recently our procurement team recognized that some of the drugs, not drugs, like supplies that we need, for example, say glucometer strips or things that we need for patient care that we order. They were ordering from other companies that would bid. And they were actually paying more for a particular item, and NHF actually supplied the item, and they didn't know until they found out because NHF had to give us some items because we ran out and couldn't get anything, and then they reached out and we got from NHF, and they recognized that the price was way less, so they were like, so why weren't we buying from NHF all along? Given that it's supposed to be one integrated system. But I guess that's what happens when you have, the region health authorities and then they are now responsible for procuring as opposed to a central procurement. Because I'm assuming that wouldn't have happened if it was just being procured by the ministry or NHF and then distributing to the different areas. So definitely this integrated approach would have saved us, some money.
Yeah. All right. Yep. No, sure. And then the whole thing about the movement of medication, because if in one region, you're coming to the end of your thing, but you don't have the budget to get more, could you get medication from another region or something like that? Because I can tell you millions of dollars are wasted in medications because you have to dump them because somebody was not paying attention to expiry dates, or when they were procuring, they procured medication which had too close an expiry date. So all of these decisions have to be worked out in advance. Get it right. Get it right. That's why I kept going back to this whole thing about what did we have over here? The right drugs, the right quality, the right quantity, the right people, the right time. You have to get all of these right if you want to make sure you can get it right finally. Because remember when we were looking at inefficiency, and we said that one of the big areas was this whole thing about prescribing, dispensing, storing vaccines, etc., where you can have a lot of wastage. And then that's one of the big areas of inefficiency in the health system. So pay attention to that, to that, to that. Good. So this is now, we now finished with our 8th session. We have 2 more sessions. So you have a break for a couple of weeks and we pick it up. We finish those 2 sessions and then you have like another month in between and then we get into the mini research presentations. So we're getting there. We are getting there. So soon you'll get rid of me. So, bear up in all of this. Right. So 2 things then. One is that we'll pick it up again in 2 weeks when we have the sessions dealing with universal coverage, and then a matter of efficiency, the last two sessions. And the people who have not contacted me yet for your mini research, sort of, a little push or a little help, then please reach out to me to get that done. The one group who had approached me for their mini research, two groups have got theirs, one with whom I'm going to send something to you, in about an hour time, so that you can have that to work with. So lots of materials in your
Thank you, sir. Enjoy your weekend.
Yep, all right, and then enjoy your holiday. I'll see you again, talk to you again in 2 weeks.
All right.
Right.
Take care, sir. Take care,
Okay.
everybody.
Yep, all right.
Good night, sir. Good night, everybody.
All right, yeah, all right.
Right.